Hi, everyone. We're going to be talking about a really easy subject today, bribery. The Bible condemns bribery in multiple verses, but what exactly is bribery? What is that even defined as being? The verses generally talk about bribery as paying someone to pervert justice, to bring about a result that you wouldn't otherwise get. Bribing a judge to rule a certain way in a court proceeding comes to mind. If you look at bribery in a legal dictionary, it'll say this: the offering, giving, receiving, or soliciting of something of value for the purpose of influencing the action of an official in the discharge of his or her public legal duties. But in business, what do we do with the fact that in certain international environments, bribery, depending on how you define it, is just the way business is done? Do we withdraw as Christians from all those areas where that's the case? Do we go with the idea of when in Rome, do as the Romans do and go along with it? Aren't there laws against bribery? And while we're at it, what exactly is wrong with bribery anyway? Why are we so against it? What's the problem with it? So we'll talk about those a little bit. Let me set this up in this way. What would you do if you were faced with this? It's your job. You are hired to set up internet coffee houses in a developing country. You're asked to set them up in a certain period of time. But when you come to actually the point where you're getting things done, you find out that it's going to take 6 to 9 months to get electricity and telephones going. And your boss and your supervisor tell you, that's not going to work. We have to have this coffee house set up way before that. So you talk to some people and find out of a recognized procedure in that particular country that if you pay a government official $1,000 in recognition of his official status, that will speed up and you'll get those things, electricity or phones, immediately. Well, what do? Do you do that or do you not do that, and why? When you object a bit, your supervisor says, why don't you take off your red, white, and blue glasses a little bit? That's the way things are done in this country. Don't stand back and be critical until you fully understand what's happening. So do you do it? Is this what's ethically impermissible in the Bible? Is this the kind of thing that the Bible talks about? Or what about this one? This happened to me. You're in a country behind the Iron Curtain, which no longer exists, but once did, with your wife and 2 children. You're not supposed to be there. I'll probably leave it at that. And you're pulled over by police. They figure out pretty quickly that you're Americans, and through your translator, they say, we'll let you go if you pay us $50 in U.S. currency immediately, right here, right now. And if you don't, we're going to take you, meaning the dad, the husband, me, someplace where your family's not going to see you for a long time, and they're going to be left without you. Well, what do? Do you pay that? Is it ethically proper to pay that? Would we call that a bribe in the sense of the Bible prohibiting bribery? As a lawyer, I deal with the Foreign Corrupt Practices Act sometimes, and some of its provisions may surprise you a bit. For instance, it does not prohibit sums to officials whose duties are ministerial in order to accelerate the performance of an administrative service. Basically, it's called grease money, and what it talks about is the speeding up of something to which you would otherwise be entitled. You just get it faster. That is not considered a bribe. The definition of bribe does not include that in the Foreign Corrupt Practices Act. So in the internet coffee house case we were just talking about, under that act at least, that would not be a bribe. There would be nothing illegal about paying that fee for faster service, if you will. And when you think about it, it makes sense. I mean, are we committing bribery that's prohibited in the Bible when we hire FedEx to deliver something faster than the U.S. Postal Service? Or when we hire a passport company to get our passport renewed a bit faster? When we pay a premium for faster service? Probably not. Bribery, I would suggest this. The way to think of bribery, and that which is not permitted scripturally, is the payment for something which you otherwise would not get, a business opportunity which you otherwise would not get. You pay $50,000 to have a government contract awarded to your company. That's not speeding up something you'd otherwise be entitled to. That's creating the entire business opportunity with paying somebody for it. That's the kind of thing, that's the perversion of justice and the taking things out of the proper ethical track that the Bible prohibits. Why are we opposed to bribery? I brought that up a few minutes ago. It's interesting sometimes to ask people in a group, we have laws against bribery. Why? Sometimes the room falls deadly silent at that time. The reason is, from a business standpoint, I can tell you, there are a lot of studies on this, and the quality of business generally declines in areas where the awarding of business is given on the basis of who has the most money. When you award contracts, you award business opportunities for reasons other than merit, other than who has the best product, who provides the best service. The quality of business will go down overall. The economic life will go down overall in those countries. And there are studies bearing that out. So that's one of the certainly practical effects of bribery and why we want to avoid it. When we discuss the ethics of bribery, it's helped me to have a diagram. And on the left, you'll see there is a gift. Coming across, you then have a premium, then you have a tip, then you have a bribe, and then you have extortion. The gift, to define that, is something like if I have a client that's given me a lot of work over the years, I will give them something as a thank you, with no expectation of anything in return. That's a true gift, the fact that there's no expectation of something coming back. If it's a premium, I would suggest that's a better word than a bribe for what we were discussing with the Internet Coffee House. The speeding up of services, paying for faster services, paying a premium for that, I would suggest is not a bribe. Now, when you get into a tip, that's closer on the diagram to a bribe, and there's a reason for that. The acronym TIP, many people don't realize, TIPS, TIPS, to ensure prompt service, or some people say to ensure proper service. Well, what does that say? If you're ensuring prompt service in the future, that means you don't pay a tip at the end of your meal, you'd pay a tip at the beginning. Well, if you go to a show, let's say, and someone taking the tickets as you go in says, I'll put you in the front 2 rows for $50, I could call that a tip to ensure prompt service, but it's feeling a lot like a bribe, creating a business opportunity. So the true meaning of tip, paying it in advance, is probably more like a bribe. A tip at a restaurant, not so much. Then you go over to extortion. I would suggest that the behind the iron curtain story that I told you, that's extortion. I wouldn't even call that a bribe. I would say it's ethically improper. This is an easy one, actually. Ethically improper to demand extortion, but not ethically improper to pay it. In that case, if I had not paid it, what would have happened to my family would have been far worse, far more difficult to justify ethically. If I take a client to lunch, if I've represented automotive companies in the past, if I go up and take a whole legal department to lunch and I have no expectation in return, I would say that's a gift, that's a thank you. However, if I go, and even in the back of my mind, I'm thinking there should be some quid pro quo here. If I take you all to lunch, do I get some new cases from you? Then you've crossed over, I think. Then you're more in a bribe situation. In an extortion situation, reminds me of a professor that I teach ethics with who said on his honeymoon he came back from Mexico, and in the airport flying home, they let his wife through, and then she stood there, but they didn't let him through. They said, if you want to get through, empty your pockets. And so he did. And I would say there's nothing ethically improper about emptying your pockets and paying extortion, because that's what that is. We would suggest that the meaningful distinction in this area is between a premium and an actual bribe. If you're talking about speeding up something to which you would otherwise be entitled, we would suggest that's a premium and not impermissible in biblical ethical principles. If you are paying for a business opportunity that you would not otherwise get, that, we would say, is the bribery that Scripture regards askance, and we would as well. The former, the premium, not a bribe. The latter would pervert justice and would be a bribe. So hopefully that's helpful to you here today.